Welcome everyone to today's OD6 Metals Investor Briefing webinar. It's a pleasure to have you with us. My name is Christy Bryson from Investor Relations Consultancy, Corporate Storytime. OD6 Metals is a listed company pursuing exploration and development opportunities in the critical minerals space. I am delighted to be joined today by Brett Hazelden, Managing Director and CEO of OD6 Metals, along with Founder and Geological Advisor, Dr. Darren Holden. During today's live investor briefing webinar, Brett and Darren will be taking us through an overview of OD6 recently announced Quinn Fluorspar Project acquisition in Nevada, USA, a strategically positioned critical mineral opportunity in the USA, which is currently wholly reliant on imports for its fluorspar consumption. Darren and Brett will also outline the acquisition rationale, historic high-grade results, US critical mineral context, and the planned exploration and development pathway. After the presentation, the presenters will be pleased to take any questions during the Q&A session. If you're joining us live, you are welcome to submit your questions at any time during the webinar via the Q&A function at your screen. If we're unable to address your question, we'll follow up with responses after the webinar. So without any further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Brett and Darren to present.
So Quinn Fluorspar Project, as Christy mentioned, it's US critical minerals, and it's also located in Nevada in the US. So there's a pretty picture here of where it all sits. We're just north of Las Vegas, about 200 kilometers north, Reno, and then we'll show you a little bit later that it's near the Hawthorne base as well, which is where all the critical mineral stockpile will be. So most people go, well, what the hell's fluorspar? Which is an interesting question for most. And then when you start looking into the details, it is just used in virtually anything that's future-facing and a future commodity being used as well. So AI semiconductor chips, batteries, nuclear power, aerospace, and topical at the moment, defense, unfortunately. But look, it's a well-known and well-used element that's gone through there. So the Nevada Fluorspar Project itself, it's an epithermal fluorspar. Darren will talk through the geology as we go through it and a lot of the historic grades. Importantly, these grades are really high, so you will see a lot of systems between 8 to 30%. But as soon as you get 30% above, they're generally high-grade systems, and they can get up to 80% systems as well, which are more smaller systems and vein. But we'll walk through all that as we go. It's a critical mineral that's listed in the US, the EU, Canada, and Australia. We'll touch on that a little bit more. As Christy mentioned right at the top, the US currently imports 100% of the fluorspar product into America. So from our point of view, it's a perfect commodity and a perfect thematic as well. The US is reliant on it. It's a critical mineral, and we can get into production hopefully relatively quickly. Noting that the US currently demand is about 400,000 tonnes per annum, so plenty of demand there. Most of these shows are somewhere between 50 to 150,000 tonnes per annum, just for people's guidance. There's a couple of bigger ones here and there around the world, but China does dominate the market, which we'll also touch on. And later on, we'll also get into the TVN case study, so Tavan in Kimberley, Western Australia. Just under $1 billion market cap, looking to supply into Asia. It's a great complementary asset when you start looking at it, and a good story that we can obviously use to continue to progress what we're doing with the market. Some historic highlights. So it's a district style area. There's multiple historic mines or areas that have been assayed and looked at. So the Mammoth one up into the north there, Spar, Big Jim, Rocket, and through the Horseshoe. So Horseshoe and Mammoth were probably the main ones, but so that were mines. But going forward, there's plenty of opportunity through there. Big Jim especially, big high grades there as well. So 35 to 80% grades in some of these, and all the way up to 94% as well at Big Jim. So big opportunity there just to continue to expand what was virtually shut down in the 1950s when America virtually exported everything overseas for cheap production. So the fluorspar market in general, it's about a 8 million tonne per annum market. It's $2 to $3 billion in terms of acid spar market demand. If people don't, we will use fluorspar and fluorite interchangeably here. It's the same thing. It's a mineral. That mineral's then taken into downstream processing that will convert it into various other downstream products. Key here is acid spar is generally the main demand here, greater than 97% CAF2. Um, so generally everyone has to upgrade it. The upgrading process is fairly simple. The process is a bit like copper where it's a crush, a grind, and then a flotation circuit. You take the concentrate off and then that's virtually the product. There are some minerals in there that you don't want in there, so arsenic and other things like that. And if you do have arsenic in there, it either can't be used in certain downstream processes, or you take a very big discount on it as well. Metspar is the other one that's in there as well. So Metspar goes into the steel industry a lot, and also ceramics and a few other things. Metspars can be sold as a lump or a fine, as a direct product. So something that we'll look at moving forward. So let's touch on a high level. What are the essential uses at the moment? So I mentioned semiconductors and chip etching. Obviously, lots of things happening there in the AI world and also data center world at the moment. Advanced battery technologies, and we'll get into these in a little bit more detail as we go. Defense, hydrofluoric acid, etc. The spot prices do sit between $450 to $650 a ton. There's three different markets floating around the world. There's the US market, which is the Mexico's selling into at the moment, which is really the Mexican supply cost. But they do have high impurities sitting into that. There's also the European market and also the Asian markets, and they do vary there based on grade and obviously what it's being used for. I suppose the important thing for us when we were looking at this, and we started looking at it late last year, from a rare earth perspective, obviously we've been looking at that with OD6 for a long time, but being in America is one step up from the rare earths, which is America looking to get supply going forward. So if America can be reliant on their own production, their own supplies, then that's tick number one. So from Donald Trump point of view, everyone wants to talk Donald Trump at the moment. He actually formalised Fluorspar going in his first term as the critical mineral list. So it's been there for a while there. It's been known about. It just hasn't quite got the attraction which the market is now seeing. And Tavan's obviously had massive success with. So there's high importance there on defence going forward, getting rid of foreign supply and obviously downstream uses in there. Nevada, I think everyone's fairly well aware of Nevada nowadays. There's been some really successful Australian juniors going to Nevada of late, Sun Silver being one, AT4 another one, VKA another one for tungsten as well. So a lot of companies going into Nevada. I think the key for Nevada that people need to remember is America itself has either got billion-dollar companies and they're all listed, and they're the miners that go, or the exploration is actually funded by generally private funding. So they don't have that market like the ASX where we'll fund companies to go do the exploration. So Australia is effectively going to be exporting into America that technology and that knowledge of how to explore and grow resources in Nevada that all the big companies have either forgotten about or missed, or just haven't been sexy for the last 50 to 70 years. So Nevada's number one best jurisdiction in the world in the most recent Fraser Institute. It's a good place to be, and a lot of companies are having massive success and massive share price increase as well. From a strategic positioning point of view, there's plenty of things happening in America, as people are aware. Project Vault was announced, $12 billion critical mineral stockpile. A lot of that stockpile is going to be located near Hawthorne, which is about 300 kilometres to the west of where we are in Nevada, so not far. The Fast 41 in terms of permitting pathways to try and accelerate development of all these critical minerals. There's obviously things happening in Australia as well with the Critical Minerals Strategic Reserve, which we've been involved with from a rare earth point of view. And there is a second little company in America that's looking at Fluorspar. They're looking at doing about 20,000 tonnes potentially this year and maybe 50,000 tonnes next year. And they managed to get some Department of Defence contracts worth up to $250 million over 5 years. So it just shows you that there's plenty of value, and the US is throwing money at these critical minerals to try and get things happening. So there's also federal and state loan programs, strategic offtake banking that then allows you to do your debt financing, and some prioritisation that will hopefully access as well as we go through the process. Fluorspar in general, just let's have a look at supply. So generally, China's been the main supplier to the world, then secondary Mexico. China was a net exporter, it's now a net importer. So the Mongolian little pie on that chart there in blue is now actually coming into China. They're actually running through the reserves very quickly. So big opportunity there for obviously other countries to bring in new supply. So let's jump into a little bit more detail on the uses, and then we'll get right into the technical stuff with Darren. But AI semiconductors, what's it used for? It's used for plasma etching and wafer cleaning as the key ones there. The key here is that the US CHIPS Act's investing over $50 billion in trying to get obviously more onshoring of chip facilities in America. So massive amount of investment happening there. You got Intel and US domestic fabrication expanding, and more chips, so equals more fluorine effectively per wafer that needs to be done. Batteries, important here. If you look at lithium-ion batteries, everyone never looks at the chemistry, but it's a LiPF6, so 6 fluorines for every phos and 1 lithium. So uh, it's a key component in there. Again, no fluorine, no lithium batteries there. And again, there's a lot of building that's accelerating in the US and battery gigafactories that are happening as well. So that 400,000 tonnes of demand we expect to continue to increase as more and more of these initiatives in the US take hold. Nuclear power, interesting one. If you take a yellow cake and you want to turn it into nuclear fuel rods, and probably topical, obviously, given what's happening in Middle East at the moment, to enrich uranium, you need to enrich it to a uranium hexafluoride. So again, 6 fluorines with 1 uranium, then it goes into centrifuges and then into the nuclear fuel rods. So again, no fluorine, no nuclear fuel rods. So there's plenty of demand coming out of these. The AI data centers also are starting to propose a number of nuclear power stations for reliable power supply. Wind and solar just don't do it by themselves. So there's a link there that people can click on and take you to an ABC story there. But Microsoft and Google are both looking at restarting some US nuclear plants, and no doubt that will continue to be built out. Topical at the moment, defence. There's plenty of uses for fluorine within these, and these are in different, obviously, states, but submarine electronics through to military grade, lithium batteries, jet engine components, all the aluminium that's used in aerospace also uses fluorine to help get the aluminium to where it needs to as well. So from a case study point of view, let's point out TVN or Tavan, which is in Kimberley in Western Australia. So they've put out an updated resource recently of 43.2 million tonnes at 8% CaF2. There is a high-grade core in there of 9 million tonnes, which totals 20% CaF2 as well. So that's their high-grade core. They've got a good asset there. They've obviously run up to $1 billion. The resources that we're looking at are plus 30% historic resources out there that we can't really get into because they're not JORC compliant, but it does show that we do have a big upside there as well. The key for Tavan is they have done a number of offtake deals or working with the Japanese, Jogmec's in there, and Sumitomo, I think it was. So what they'll be focusing on is Asia. For us, we'll obviously be targeting the US market, which has currently got that 400,000 tonnes of demand. So plenty of companies there that we can look to work with. So we're not trying to compete with them. There will be the only 2 guys that will be listed with a Fluorspar asset on the ASX. So they are complementary assets, and big picture thinking there is we can both make big money into this expanding asset class. So in terms of location and access, so Las Vegas, a little bit just 200 k's to the south. There's a big area that sits in there that you'll see that was the old nuclear testing grounds, and also Area 51 from way back. Geez, when was that, Darren? Back in the 1930s, I think it was. You're the expert.
Well, the nuclear testing was in the 50s and 60s. The alien visitations to Area 51 and storing all the alien spacecraft underground, as America likes to talk about, is well, it's still happening apparently, according to the locals.
There you go.
Yeah.
Key on this slide here is there's the Hawthorne US Strategic Mineral Reserve base. So there it is. We actually drove past it when we were out on site a few weeks back to making sure that there's actually something there and kicking the dirt. So we have been out to site. We have collected some samples. There will be some assays that we obviously want to get out there once we get them received so that we can inform ourselves that during the due diligence appearance that the historic resources and the grades actually do stack up. But what we saw was we did see for lots of fluorspar. There's a whole heap of other assets obviously on there as well, gold assets and Reno and a few other things, but it's a great area to be in. What I'll do now is I'll hand over to Darren just to talk through obviously the system and the geology of it all, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so these are epithermal type deposits. So we're more familiar with epithermal in investment sense for gold and silver, but these are actually fluorspar deposits. So the formation of them is relatively straightforward. If you've got a fluorine-rich intrusion coming in that's driving acidic fluids into limestones. Limestones are calcium carbonate, CaCO3. So in comes the acidic fluids that, of course, helps dissolve the limestone away, and the calcium goes into dissolved fluorine to form CaF2, which is fluorspar. There's a number of different styles of deposit from a structural control. You can have fault-hosted vein systems. You can have replacing whole beds in limestone, and you have breccia pipes and pooling beneath the silica caps. So they're all known types of deposits. We actually have them all represented on our project. So Mammoth, that we're going to talk about, is a breccia pipe. Horseshoe is a replacement style. Big Jim looks like it's high-grade veins, and also pooling under the silica cap at places like Spa also. So that gives us potential with fairly classic, fairly conventional type geological setting for these kind of deposits. If we go to the next one, Brett. So geologically, did we miss one?
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, geologically, we have some Ordovician limestones, but tertiary volcanism in this area. So the last 30 million years or so, a couple of intrusions off to the south, and we've been mapping out the regional alteration on that. But we have got these limestones and dolomites, both of which are carbonate rocks, which are reacting to form the fluorspar. Mammoth is estimated at 50 to 60 meters true width of the high-grade fluorspar breccia. Bit of historic sampling done with a bit of trenching and road cuttings that were put through there. Includes 10 meters at 44.9% CaF2, so that's very high grade. And there was a little adit that was put in along the footwall that was into the altered limestone, not into the fluorspar breccia itself, but that was running 17%. So that's significant that potential for bear in mind that 17% is high grade to, say, groups like Tavan, whereas us, it will be more like a low grade thing. But it's 50 to 60 meters true width on that, and it's mapped out over several hundred meters of strike length, which I think is the next one. Yeah, so it's about 9,000 square meters of mapped high grade fluorspar in breccia. Individual assay results have gone up to sort of 80%, but there's 15 meters at 48% in a channel sample as well. We just haven't been able to pinpoint that exactly, so it's not on the map. Whereas the 10.7 meters at 45% is mapped on there, but it does continue for some distance. It's open to the north, and there's a talus slope cover downhill to the east and the southeast, and it's open in that direction also. So that eastern contact is not known. Then if we go on to Horseshoe. Horseshoe is a replacement style. It's running parallel with the bedding in the limestone. It's very high grade, includes this raccoon tail texture, and that's exposed in the face. There was a little open pit here that took about 26,000 metric tons of high grade out in the 1950s. It leaves beautiful exposure through there. It's got an estimated thickness of about 30 meters. And extends under a limestone cap to the uphill to the northeast and down beneath the talus cover off to the southwest as well. So obviously we've got to get in and drill that out to resource, but you can see the ore body exposed. It's about 3,000 square meters of high grade mapped there, but it is open because it's replacing a particular bed in the limestone. It is open up dip and down dip on there as well. Rock chips up to 71%, averages of 44.9% from surface samples, and that was the open pit mining grade estimated average as well from when that was extracting those couple of little open pits there, which are still well and truly exposed. In terms of other prospects, we've converted all of the historic data from feet to meters. So when you see numbers like 6.1 meters, it seems like an odd number to put in there because it's not a round number. It's because it's converted from the original feet in there. But we have Spa, which is just off to the east, not quite shown on this map. Big Jim, Rocket, and Jumbo with high grade structures in there. But what's significant is what we call in geology a lithocap. A lithocap forms at the surface in a hot spring environment. So if you would go to New Zealand and went around the hot springs along Rotorua, you'd see all the silica terraces. That's indicating the top surface position of the epithermal system. So that's sitting up on a hill here. It's about 70,000 square meters lithocap. And then the fluorspar occurrences are basically down in the valleys between that. But the thought being that these potential occurrences could join between and through that whole lithocap, and that's a significant exploration target for us that could potentially see us with a sizable another sizable system on there. So a little bit less is known about these occurrences compared to the main Mammoth and Horseshoe, but we think there's excellent potential to be had here, and it's just a few kilometers from Horseshoe to get to these. You can see just faded out on that satellite image all the tracks that go in and around the area, so access is very good through this whole region.
So going back to obviously next steps and how to mine this type of things. So we will be looking to, as part of the due diligence period, we're going to do a whole heap of geological on-ground works. We'll drill this out post due diligence, and then the way for the processing of this will be it'll be an open pit mine on most of those areas to start with, and then maybe on that lithocap, if there is something under there, it might go underground, but for some of the higher grade deposits, but generally quite simple mining technology. And processing, as I mentioned, if it's a met spar, it could be as simple as a crushed lump and fine, like you see in iron ore, or you can take it another step further to milling it and then floating it. So something that we'll look at from a CapEx and OpEx point of view as we continue to go through the process. So let's mention acquisition terms at the moment. So we've got a 120-day option period for $75,000. It's a really good, cheap deal for us to get in our foot on it. It's exclusive as well. We can extend that for another 60 days. As I mentioned, Darren and I did go out there and have a look at this project before we did announce it. We're happy with what we're seeing. We're happy with the geology, and we're happy with where we think it's going to go. We just obviously need to do a little bit of further investigating into certain areas. When we exercise the option, it's a $200,000 payment, 50% cash, 50% shares. They can actually elect to take some more of that cash as shares on all of these deals going forward. And then as we determine where we want to go drill permit and then drill, there'll be getting the permitting approval in place, be another 200,000. That's to get them to help us assist the permitting process going forward. As soon as we commence the drilling, then there's another payment, and then there's a number of deferred payments, which are shown on the right here. And we've done this deliberately so that we back end the deal. So if suddenly there's some major problem there or major issue that we haven't seen, or it doesn't continue where we think, we can obviously leave fairly easily. But what we've seen out there at the moment, we've actually said we actually think there's something really sizable out there. So let's talk about future. So milestone 1, mineral resource greater than 2 million tonnes at a grade of 30%, greater than 30% CAF2. That's if you read between the lines on that, you'll obviously note that there's historic non-compliant resource out there. So that would probably be just doing the initial conversions. Then we take it up to 5 million tonnes, similar grade, but with metallurgical recovery in there as well. Then onto a bankable study and JORC reserves, along with an IRR greater than 20%, and then off into commercial production. So I've tried to structure it with the thought process of, hey, we're all targeting getting this into production as soon as we can. So good terms for, I think, both the vendor and ourselves as well, and it's based on success. Next steps going forward. So whole heap of groundwork's about to commence. We have been out there, as I mentioned. We'll be out there straight after Easter at this stage, based on people's availability. But we'll be doing some systematic surface rock chip sampling and channel sampling, verifying all the assay grades. We've already got some samples going through labs as we speak, and we'll be doing more of that as we get out there. We'll be doing a whole heap of geological mapping and structural interpretation, geochemistry, geophysics, and then getting on to where we're going to drill and how we're going to drill it, along with the permitting requirements to get on with that. And at the same time, we'll look to get some metallurgical sampling and testing done, get some bulk samples to start with from hand. But once we do the drilling, we'll look to get some drill core out there and actually send that off to the lab as well. So really, that's a summary on the project itself. We've obviously got the Quinn Fluorspar Project in the US. We've got our flagship Splinter Rock Rare Earth Project, which is still continuing with all the ANSTO works and everything else. and we're continuing to work through that with the Australian government and others. And then Golf Creek Copper, we're just waiting on some assays to come in at the moment, but there is also a downhole EM target that came in when we went through the last drill program. That looks it's about 70 to 100 meters deeper than our last hole that we drilled, and we'll be going back and drill testing that in the coming months or during this year. Corporate snapshot, this was pre-raise, but obviously we've had a good run off the back of announcing this deal. So we've gone up from 5 cents up to 10 cents effectively. So we've doubled the project, but doubled the value of the company. But our enterprise value and market cap still sits around probably $20 million US currently. So there's plenty of upside on this project. If you look at Tavan at $1 billion, even if we got to say $150 million market cap, that's a 50-cent share price. So we think that's readily achievable going forward, and that the investors should be getting on board now with huge upside as we progress through this area. So that's the presentation. I'll hand back to Christy.
Thanks for that, Brett and Darren. We'll now move on to the Q&A segment. We've received a number of questions via email and pre-registrations, plus we'll keep an eye out for any questions received during the webinar. So the first question, is the mineralization vein hosted or breccia replacement hosted?
Well, we answered that in it. It's actually both vein and breccia and replacement hosted. So we'll get the big thicknesses in breccia hosted deposits such as Mammoth, and replacement bed hosted stuff such as Horseshoe. But then Spar and Big Jim are veins. Veins reported historically from 6 meters wide, or from 1 meter wide to 6 to potentially 10 meters wide. But that stuff is basically pure massive fluorspar. So our big zones will get the bulk of the tonnage, Horseshoe and Mammoth in the breccia replacement stuff, and the breccia in the sediment replacement. But then the tribute super high grade veins present substantial opportunity too.
What evidence is there for large hydrothermal system feeding the fluorite mineralization?
Well, several kilometers of alteration mineralization with fluorite in it, from Horseshoe up to Mammoth in the northeast. There is a large causative intrusion off to the south. There's a number of rhyolite dikes cutting through the area as well. And through some satellite mapping that we've been working on, there's a large epithermal footprint. So we believe, in terms of phyllic alteration, we believe there's a lot more to be discovered here. I mean, what the old timers got to was what they found in the valleys and on the outcrops on the hills. But we think there's a substantial epithermal system stretching over several kilometers. The large lithocap identified as well shows that we're in the very upper parts of an epithermal system. On that, it's more than 70,000 square meters on a lithocap on basically a silica terrace. So yeah, it looks like that whole eastern side of the Quinn Canyon range has got substantial epithermal mineralization.
Thank you. Has the team identified the main structural controls on fluorite mineralization?
Yeah, there is a strong northeast control in terms of faults, but because we're dealing with limestones, we're used to in epithermal systems, such as into volcanics and things. We're used to faults and veins coming into these volcanics. Because we're in a limestone, acidic waters will find its own easiest path through. So that's not necessarily on structural control. That's on permissive beds in the limestone, and it just gets eaten out of that. But yes, there's a strong northeast southwest regional structural control and a number of north-south structures also.
Thank you. When are you most likely to have permits to drill?
I'll answer that one. So we are obviously in the due diligence period at the moment. So we've got 120 to 180 days on that. That said, part of that due diligence will be going through the permitting process. We've actually engaged permitting consultants, and I just had a meeting actually just before this presentation. So look, yes, we still need to find out where we want to drill. We know we want to go above and below the existing areas, but we do need to just obviously do our due diligence work in there. I did see the question come in from Murray. So what I'll do is I'll just share my screen for a second. Just this is Google Earth through there. I'll just throw that over there. So there's Las Vegas there. Vegas there in the bottom left-hand corner. Main roads heading out through Rachel and up to where the projects are with those pins. Obviously other roads heading up towards Reno, etc. So if we view in just from an ease of permitting, just so people will get to understand what's out there, it's a series of hills and obviously valleys that are sitting through here. You can see all the various tracks that are already leading through all these valleys through this process, existing tracks up to the Spa, the Horseshoe mines. You can see, so these were all put in the 50s. This is current Google Earth imagery. There's the lithocap that Darren's talking, and where Jumbo and Rocket and everyone else sits, Big Jim and Spa Mine. So there's a huge prospectivity, obviously, through there. There you can see the roads coming in through these ones as well. So all these areas have got existing roads, and there's Mammoth into that area there as well. So from a permitting point of view, we're not going in there. It's not a greenfield site. You can obviously see some water out there with crop pivots as well in the background, but it's not a greenfield site. We think we should be able to get in there and do a categoric exclusion to start with, which is a relatively short processed permitting approval that you'd do out there. And then the next step would be to do a permit of operations for larger, more extensive drilling. So I think that's just worthwhile saying that, look, it's not greenfields, there's roads out there. What was really just getting up there and drilling on existing tracks to start with, and then continuing to expand that depending on obviously the results.
Please discuss the proposed drill depths and specific drilling method proposed.
So we obviously showed you what's out there at the moment, and obviously the cross section. So they're looking at 30 to 50 metre true widths there. So you're sort of looking at 50 metre drill holes. Underneath that lithocap, they'll probably put some deeper holes down there, about 100 metres in depth. But it would be a mix of RC and diamond drilling would be the plan, and we'd want diamond drilling out there as well, so we can take those cores and send them off for metallurgical works just to see grind sizes and final grades and any impurities.
Please provide an update on the Gulf Creek Copper Project, specifically on the results of the latest drilling results.
Yep, so we haven't had any results received yet. They're still coming back from the assays, so it has been an inordinate amount of time there, but it's something that we're just obviously waiting on. We did note in there that the phase one obviously had really good results to start with. Phase two didn't really intersect massive appreciable zones of massive sulfide, so we're not expecting massive numbers, but equally that downhole EM that we did indicates an offset faults and main mineralisation a little bit further down. So key for us is get out there and stick another drill hole in there.
Is there any potential to receive funding from the US government considering the lack of supply locally in the US?
We sort of addressed that one a little bit earlier, but the short answer is yes. So yes, there's plenty of opportunities there. The US is trying to onshore this again. We've seen lots of state and federal funds thrown at these things going forward, both as grants and as loans as well. So plenty of leverage there that we can do. No doubt we'll look to do offtake funding. We'll be engaging various parties to do US government lobbying and support, and continue to fast track this project as best we can.
Are you able to give us more detail on the historic resource estimate, and why have you not announced it?
So it's not JORC compliant, so that's why we haven't announced it. So the people can actually, if they do their own research, they'll go out and have a look at these things. And there's, I think Darren included also the references once upon a time. So there's Burgard and Evans that have put some historic estimates out there. There's a few million tonnes at well over 30-40% calcium fluoride. So for us, we've now got to confirm that, get out there, put an exploration target, and then drill it and put a resource on it. So we're not trying to be difficult. It's in public domain. We just can't do it due to the ASX.
Fair enough. How do these grades benchmark against other producers and projects, and how does the historic resource compare in terms of size?
So good question. Most people probably aren't aware of fluorspar. So let's start with TVN. So TVN's got that 43 million tonnes at 8%. So obviously, if you look at total content, we're probably not dissimilar. If you look from a historic resource point of view, they do have TVN has a historic high grade zone, and I think it was 9.6 million tonnes at around 20% CAF2. So we're looking to have a higher grade, slightly less tonnes, but overall total amount of CAF2 would be very similar. So if we step back a bit and go, Darren sort of mentioned that there's different styles of fluorspar. You can have the veins, you can have the replacement systems, or you can have a big polymetallic type thing. So the high-grade veins will always be small, typical sizes of say 1 to 10 million tons. They're never shown to be big on what we've seen, but they do have grades between sort of 40 to 90%. If you look at the larger replacement tile size systems, grades generally drop a little bit, 20 to 40% grades, 5 to 40 million tons type size at the biggest size. And then the polymetallic products, they're obviously a secondary byproduct, so they're going to be sitting somewhere between 5 to 10%. They'd have to have lots and lots of tons to be economic effectively, or be a byproduct from other things. So look, there's plenty of examples around the world. As I mentioned, China and Mongolia. There's another project in Canada that's got something as well. And then you'll see some stuff in South Africa and other places around the world as well.
How significant do you think the resource size is and its strategic importance to the US can be?
So yeah, how big's a piece of string, I suppose. We know we can see it from the outcrops as we had on the cross sections. We believe it continues up and down dip on all of these areas. So yes, there's plenty of scale or scope to get this to be that 5 to 10 million tons, which is obviously one of the milestones that we put out there. And that's where we think the economics need to sit in terms of scale. The big upside for us, as Darren sort of indicated, was the lithocap with Big Jim, Spar, and Rocket and Jumbo all sort of sitting underneath that lithocap base. What's under that's going to be really interesting to see going forward, and it could be some big numbers coming out of that. So, hey, and I think the other question in there was in terms of what size would you try and make these things to? And I think I mentioned it earlier as well. So TVN, if you go back to them again, they put out a pre-feasibility study a year or so ago. They were looking to produce about 140,000 tons per annum of acid spar. So that gives you a bit of an idea of where most of these things are starting or looking at. So to get scale, you need that 5 to 10 million tons plus.
What about CapEx, OPEX, and sales price?
Right. Again, forward-looking statements. I can't get myself in trouble with the ASX here, so let's point to TVN here. With that pre-fees that I just mentioned before, I think their capex was in the order of about 200 million US, OPEX somewhere around $300 a ton US as well, and they were assuming sale prices of that $600 a ton. So gives you a bit of a guidance there. They're obviously a lower grade, more tons being mined, etc. So would expect capex to be lower. You could also start with a met spar product, which is just a crushed lump and fines, and then continue to expand out to the acid spar to just manage your capex. So look, that's some guidance, but we'll obviously look at that going forward. I think the key for us as well, and part of the reason moving into the US is US labour is still cheaper than Australia significantly. The cost to do things in the US is also cheaper than Australia. Australia has become quite cost prohibitive currently for both capital and operating costs.
Make mention of Aries as a US producer, but you say US is 100% import reliant. How does that work?
Yeah, so at the moment, Aries isn't producing. I did mention it during the meeting that they're looking to do somewhere between 20,000 tonnes this year and then potentially going up to 50,000 tonnes. They're listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange. They're going into what's artisanal workings is probably the best way to put it. So a really high grade zone, veins, and maybe a pipe there as well. So they're going to be a smaller producer. And hey, look, 400,000 tonnes per annum, plenty of room for two of us, and still having imports in from Mexico and other places as well. So, yes, US currently 100% import reliant is still a true statement, but there's a couple of us obviously working on that to make US great again, if you want to put it that way.
Is this a metallurgical easy process?
So yeah, I mentioned earlier that it's fairly similar to copper in terms of crush it, grind it, and then float it effectively. So fairly simple process. If you look at the scale of this thing, again, going back to Devan with their 150,000 tonnes of product that they're looking to produce, it's a 500,000 tonne per annum project. So baby small plants when you compare it to a lot of the copper projects treating 0.5% grades to upgrade it. So capex is low, simplicity is easy. I suppose the key from a metallurgical point of view is they do have specs in there that you need to meet. So silica levels need to be less than 1.5% once it's all upgraded and removed. And silica will be the main joint mineral that you'll see in here with the calcium fluoride. Sulfur is generally an issue, and most importantly, arsenic levels. So, arsenic levels coming out of Mexico are generally quite high. Anything less than sort of 10 to 20 ppm is what we've seen in terms of specs, is a key limit or threshold limit there. There's also some FOS other thing limits as well that you don't want to go over. So look, we believe from what we've seen out there, it looks fairly clean. We'll obviously get the assays in as we progress, and then just see what it is. So generally, it'll come down to a grind size to see how easy to liberate the calcium fluoride from the gangue material.
Are you looking at doing an OTC listing in America?
The leading question. It's something that we should be thinking about. If you look at a number of the US or Australian companies that have moved into Nevada and other parts of the US as well, they have started down that OTC path or have had success down that OTC path. And for people that don't know what OTC is, it's over the counter is what OTC means. It's like a trading of securities direct between parties with a dealer or broker. They sort of go in between rather than on a platform like the ASX. So it is a precursor to listing on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. It sort of cuts through some of those bit of paperwork that you need to do. So, look, the board would be crazy not to look at what other people are doing and consider an OTC listing, and that's been successful. So, look, yes, something we'll look at, but obviously let's get through the due diligence period and go from there.
What is the Hawthorne US Strategic Reserve?
So it's not a reserve, but it's a base. So it's an old military base that they're looking to put virtually part of Project Vault's critical minerals stored there. So if we produced an acid spar as a product, a dry product in say bulker bags, we'd stick that on a truck and then take it to what's the old army base effectively. It's about 300 kilometers away in the US. So look, if you look at costs and trucking and all those type of things, that's what's going to drive profitability in all these projects around the world. So the shorter the distance we need to ship it, and we don't need to put it on a ship, we just need to truck it actually, the cheaper it's going to be and the more money we'll make. So it's a strategic, good location if we're going to sell to the US government. But look, equally, there's plenty of other companies around that we can sell to in the US that are obviously from nuclear to the battery producers and other things as well. And you'll see obviously Tesla and other guys that are located not too far away from us.
Wow, thank you, Darren and Brett, for such a comprehensive update. To summarize, several factors make Quinn particularly attractive: high-grade historical results, a district-scale mineral system, a 100% import-dependent US market, a simple processing pathway, and a low-cost acquisition structure. This combination provides a strong foundation for OD6 to potentially become a strategic US fluorspar supplier. Unfortunately, that does bring us to the end of the Q&A session. As always, if you have further questions, please feel free to email us at info@corporatestorytime.com. Brett and Darren, before we close, do you have any final comments you'd like to share?
I'll hand over to you first and I'll finish off.
Look, we're dealing with a substantial epithermal system here. I'm surprised nobody asked where's the gold or where's the silver. Historically, there hasn't been a lot noted in this area, but it's not something we're going to ignore going forward, and we'll be keeping a strong eye out on that in this area. Incidentally, the Simonson dolomite and the Pogonite limestones are quite important geological units up on the Carlin and the Cortez Trend as well, which are some of the world's great gold mines, from about hundreds of millions of ounces of gold up in that area. So it's something that we, we'll be quite high in the system on the fluorite, but we'll be keeping an eye on it going forward. I would have thought someone would have asked that question because epithermal is normally gold and silver, right? But yeah, we'll keep you posted if we find any.
Thanks for that, Darren. I'm looking forward to obviously getting the Fluorspar in there, but if we do find some gold and copper, no doubt that'll be a big upside for us.
Yeah.
Look, I just want to thank everyone for obviously joining. We've had a good run on the share market on the back of this announcement, even with big down days in there as well. There's plenty of upside, as I mentioned there. If we get to that 150 million market cap, there's a 50-cent share price. It's big numbers for everyone there. The thematic here is perfect in terms of 100% import reliance currently, even with the Aries coming potentially in board. US strategic reserves needed, US located. It just ticks all the macro boxes that you need going forward. So we think it's a good project, hence we've got on board with it, and we'll look forward to hopefully getting some strong returns for the investors going forward.
Concludes today's webinar. A recording will be available shortly and shared through both the OD6 Metals and Corporate Storytime social media channels. On behalf of OD6 and Corporate Storytime, thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to welcoming you to our next investor briefing. Enjoy the rest of your day.